Over on PC, Heroes of Might and Magic, Civilization, and XCOM are some of the best turn-based strategy games. But what are some good mobile alternatives? That's what I asked a few weeks ago, and you guys provided a bunch of great answers. So today, I'm gonna share the 10 best turn-based strategy games on mobile, including, by the way, the game Elon Musk argues is better than chess. So we'll get back to that, but let's kick it off with the Battle for Wesnoth. This is a fantasy-themed turn-based strategy game with over 200 scenarios to play through across 16 campaigns, and lots of distinct units that each have unique abilities and weapons. Now, the overall goal in this game is to hire and train recruits to raise a powerful army that can then win against the AI or compete with other players online in the more than 50 multiplayer maps. What truly sets the game apart though is that it's entirely open source, and so since anyone can help develop it, there are now more than 400 add-ons to download, including new campaigns, new units, and new maps to play. So Battle for Wesnoth pretty much has an endless amount of content, and the only downside is that since this mobile version is a port from PC, the controls can be a bit fiddly. It's completely free to play with no ads and no in-app purchases though, so I can easily recommend checking it out. Next up is Through the Ages, which is a complex digital board game where our goal is to build up a civilization all the way from ancient times to the modern era. The game is essentially split into a politics phase where we declare war and make treaties, and then an action phase where we improve our buildings, military, and science. And we do all of that by picking cards at the top of the screen and then carefully managing the tokens that represent our workers and resources. Now, it is the type of game that takes a bit to get into, but it's also extremely well received across both Android, iOS, and my games discovery platform MiniReview, where it has a 100% user rating score. Through the Ages is a $9.99 premium game, and I think you're gonna love this one if you enjoy strategy board games that you can play offline via pass and play versus your friends online or single player against an AI. And my friends, as today's first bonus recommendation, if you're really into digital versions of strategy board games, you really gotta check out Root Board Game as well. Now, the next game on the list is Antiyoy, and it's this fast-paced minimalistic strategy game about expanding our territory to defeat all opposing civilizations across more than 140 official missions and then an almost infinite amount of user-created levels. The game is played on this type of hexagon map where we get coins based on the territories we own and then spend that on buying buildings to defend our castle and then troops so we can attack the enemies. The tricky part though is that we can only attack weaker enemies, so we have to constantly produce new units, but a larger army is also more expensive to sustain, and this is where the game starts to get really interesting because we have to very carefully manage our resources. Just like in Battle for Wesnoth, Antiyoy is completely free to play with no ads and no in-app purchases, and while it isn't as complex as some strategy games, it's a great casual game with lots of content to dive into. To be completely honest with you guys, the best mobile alternative to XCOM is, well, it's XCOM. XCOM 2 Collection is available on both Android and iOS, and it's a really solid port that includes all the original DLC and an updated UI that make the touch controls work pretty much perfectly. So if you're looking for a sci-fi themed strategy game with deep tactical battles and lots of content, XCOM 2 is perfect. The only downside is that it costs $19.99 but if you haven't played it yet, I think it's definitely worth it. And as a bonus recommendation, if you enjoy tactical combat, you might also like Rebel Cops, which is also available on both Android and iOS. Today's next game though is the Braveland series, and specifically Braveland Pirate, which is a strategy game inspired by the combat system found in the Heroes of Might and Magic PC game. So the game has us travel from island to island while looking for a hidden treasure, which inevitably, and actually constantly, leads to battles where we have to use our units and main hero to defeat all the opponents. Now, this is not a fully blown Heroes of Might and Magic alternative, but it's still a great casual turn-based strategy game that might be able to scratch just a bit of that same itch. The game costs $5.49 on Android and, surprisingly, only $2.99 on iOS, but it also often goes on sale for just a single dollar, and it's free if you have Google Play Pass, so be sure to keep an eye on this one. Next up is Battlevoid Harbinger, which is a casual strategy space combat game with roguelike elements. So the overall goal in this game is to get through 4 maps by completing the main objectives, which typically involve finding and destroying certain enemies. Thankfully though, as we explore the universe, we'll also bump into friendly space stations where we can buy new weapons and upgrades, which is a critical part of being able to defeat the many different enemy species we meet. While the game might lack a bit of depth, it's easily one of the best sci-fi themed light strategy games that mixes turn-based gameplay with real-time combat. And it only costs a single US dollar on Android and $2.99 on iOS, which is honestly pretty cheap for the amount of gameplay. And now for an old classic called UniWar, where we move units around on a hexagon map to defeat all opponents across a single single-player campaign, and casual and competitive multiplayer that you can play alone or in teams of up to 4 versus 4. The game features 3 different races that each have 8 standard and a few unlockable units, and then, and hold on now, more than 50,000 user-created maps that help keep the gameplay fresh. And since you can play asynchronously, you can even run multiple games at the same time, which is just awesome. UniWar is free to play with some ads and in-app purchases that allow you to unlock units faster, and this is the game's biggest downside, but with so much content and so many different game modes, I think it's still definitely worth checking out. Next up is Rebel Incorporated, which is a simulation strategy game where we are put in charge of an entire country immediately after a war has ended, and it's now our job to rebuild and stabilize the region. And that, trust me, is no easy task. There are lots of things to keep in mind, and our success in this game depends on careful management and tough decision making. Because, for example, while we can improve our reputation by funding our healthcare and education systems, we have to balance that against expanding our military so we can fight back any harmful groups attacking us. It's overall just a complex and fun strategy game that is, surprisingly, free to play with just a few in-app purchases to remove the ads and unlock new maps that can also slowly be earned through gameplay. So if you enjoy political strategy games, this one is a must-play. And as not one, but actually 2 bonus recommendations, a new tactical turn-based game called Bernard's Star recently released, and it looks like an awesome sci-fi game that has drawn a bit of inspiration from XCOM, so it's definitely worth checking out. And the Into the Breach mobile port is getting lots of great feedback as well, so if you have Netflix, be sure to check that one out. Up next is what I can only conclude is Elon Musk's favorite mobile game, the Battle of Polytopia. This is a casual turn-based world-building strategy game with short play sessions, single-player and online multiplayer, and randomly generated maps that keep the game interesting. So in terms of the core gameplay experience here, after selecting one of 14 unique leaders, the goal is to defeat all opponents or score the most points in just 30 turns by expanding our kingdom, researching new technologies, and preparing an army for combat. The game is also free to play, with the online multiplayer mode unlocking after purchasing any of the premium leaders for $1 to $2. This is truly an amazing game with a perfect 100% user rating score on Mino Review, so I strongly recommend it. But if you've already played Polytopia and you're looking for something slightly different, you might also want to take Hexonia for a spin, because it's essentially a decently well-made Polytopia clone. The next game is Phobies, which is a tactical strategy game where we have 3 keys per turn that we use to spawn our units on the map, each of which have unique stats and attacks that define its damage, how far it can move, and how much health it has. So the goal in a game of Phobies is to destroy the opponent's heart on the other side of this hex grid map, or just kill all the enemies. And in between matches, we then upgrade our units and unlock new ones. What truly sets the game apart though is that it features both asynchronous multiplayer matches and real-time multiplayer, in addition to friendly battles and single-player challenges. Now, the biggest downside to all of this is that the in-app purchases give paying players a pay-to-progress faster advantage. But on the bright side, there's no energy system, and I think the truly unique gameplay makes it worth checking out as a casual game. But let me know in the comments what you think about the monetization if you've already played the game. There you go, my friends, 14 awesome turn-based strategy games on mobile, but we're not done because I recently covered the very best offline playable RPGs as well, so check that out, and until next time, just keep gaming, stay awesome, and I'll see you guys around.